The small community center on Maple Street was nothing special from the outside. Just another brick building with wide windows and a few potted plants by the entrance. But for Lily Chen, it represented something between a sanctuary and a battlefield. She stood at the front desk clutching a worn leather bag, her knuckles white as she filled out the registration form for adult piano lessons. "Previous musical experience?" asked the receptionist, a friendly older woman with glasses hanging from a beaded chain. Lily hesitated, her pen hovering over the paper. "None," she finally wrote, the single word a lie that made her stomach twist. The receptionist smiled. "That's perfectly fine, dear. Many of our adult students are beginners. Mr. Patterson is wonderful with new students." Lily nodded and finished the form, careful to keep her hands from trembling. At 32, she looked like any other working professional. Simple clothes, practical shoes, and tired eyes that suggested long hours at her office job. Nothing about her appearance hinted at who she had once been. Minghui Chen, the child prodigy who had performed with the Boston Symphony Orchestra at age 11 and whose recordings of Chopin had once been praised by critics across 3 continents. 15 years had passed since she had last performed publicly. 15 years since the disaster that had made her walk away from music entirely. 15 years of deliberately ordinary life as just Lily, the quiet administrative assistant who never mentioned music to anyone. The following Tuesday, Lily arrived 10 minutes early for her first lesson. The practice room was small but clean, with a simple upright piano that had seen better days. She sat on the bench, careful not to touch the keys, fighting the muscle memory that wanted to position her hands in their familiar places. Mr. Patterson knocked gently before entering. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a casual manner. "You must be Lily," he said, offering his hand. "I'm Tom Patterson. Welcome to our little musical community." "Thank you," she replied quietly. "I should warn you that I know absolutely nothing about playing piano," he laughed. "Everyone starts somewhere. Let's see where your somewhere is." For the next 45 minutes, Mr. Patterson patiently showed Lily how to position her hands, explained the basic notes, and helped her play a simple C major scale. She deliberately made her fingers clumsy, pressing too hard on some keys and barely touching others. She hunched her shoulders and furrowed her brow in manufactured concentration. "Not bad for a first try," Mr. Patterson said encouragingly. "You have surprisingly good hand positioning for a beginner." Lily stiffened. "Really? I was just doing what felt comfortable." "That's often the best approach," he said. "Some students take months to stop holding their hands like claws." "You've got a natural feel for it," she laughed nervously. "Just lucky, I guess." As the lesson continued, Lily carefully maintained her act. When Mr. Patterson taught her "Mary Had a Little Lamb," she deliberately missed notes and played with hesitant timing. When he demonstrated proper wrist position, she nodded as if the concept was entirely new. By the end of the hour, her back ached from the unnatural posture she had maintained. But Mr. Patterson seemed completely convinced of her beginner status. "Practice for about 15 minutes each day," he said as she packed up. "And don't worry about perfection. Just enjoy exploring the instrument." Lily nodded. "I'll try." Later that evening, Lily sat in her small apartment staring at the electronic keyboard she had purchased from a second-hand store. She had told herself it was necessary for her cover story. A beginner would need something to practice on. But the truth was more complicated. After 15 years of silence, some buried part of her was desperate to play again. With trembling hands, she plugged in the keyboard and turned it on. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic outside her window. She glanced at her phone to make sure it was turned off. No one could hear what she was about to do. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment. Then, almost of their own accord, they began to move. Not in the clumsy patterns she had shown Mr. Patterson, but with the fluid grace of someone who had spent thousands of hours mastering this instrument. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major flowed from her fingers. The familiar notes, both comforting and painful. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The precise pressure needed for each key. The subtle shifts in tempo. The delicate balance between melody and harmony. Halfway through the piece, Lily stopped abruptly, tears streaming down her face. The music had opened something inside her, some locked room of memory she had been avoiding for 15 years. She closed the keyboard and pushed it away, breathing hard. This had been a mistake. She wasn't ready to face music again, not like this. The lessons were supposed to be a gentle way back, a path to reclaim something she had loved without the crushing weight of her past. But feeling the music flow through her again made the walls she had built around her former self begin to crumble. For the next week, Lily practiced exactly as Mr. Patterson had instructed, 15 minutes a day of simple exercises and beginner melodies. She played with deliberate imperfection, recording herself to make sure her deception was convincing. By her second lesson, she had mastered the art of looking like she had never mastered anything. "You're making excellent progress," Mr. Patterson told her after she stumbled through a simple rendition of Ode to Joy. "It doesn't feel like it," Lily said truthfully. Playing so poorly when she knew exactly how the music should sound was its own kind of torture. "Don't be so hard on yourself," he said. "Learning an instrument as an adult takes courage. Most people wouldn't even try. If only he knew how much courage it had really taken. Not to learn, but to pretend she was learning. Not to face a new challenge, but to revisit the scene of her greatest failure." As the weeks passed, Lily settled into a strange double life. During lessons, she was the dedicated but limited beginner, celebrating small victories like learning to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with both hands. At home, when the longing became too great to bear, she would sometimes play real music, Bach, Mozart, Debussy, her fingers finding their way through pieces she had once performed to standing ovations. These private sessions never lasted long. The emotions they stirred up were too intense, too complicated, but she couldn't stop herself from returning to the keyboard, like someone picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. On a rainy Thursday evening after her sixth lesson, Mr. Patterson surprised her. "I think you're ready for something a bit more challenging," he said, placing a simple arrangement of Beethoven's Für Elise on the piano. "This is adapted for beginners, but it will give you a taste of classical repertoire." Lily looked at the sheet music with genuine alarm. This was a piece she had mastered at age 7, one she could play in her sleep. Even in its simplified form, pretending to struggle with it would require careful acting. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "This looks really hard." "Just the first page for now," Mr. Patterson said kindly. "Take it slowly, one measure at a time." Lily nodded and began to play, deliberately missing the first interval and then correcting herself with an embarrassed smile. She played mechanically, counting aloud as if the rhythm was challenging, pressing too hard on some notes and too softly on others. But halfway through the page, something unexpected happened. Mr. Patterson had moved to stand by the window, his back partly turned as he listened. In that moment of reduced scrutiny, Lily's fingers betrayed her. For just a few seconds, they found their natural flow, producing a phrase of such delicate expression that it seemed to come from another pianist entirely. She caught herself quickly, returning to her stumbling performance, but not before she saw Mr. Patterson turn slightly, a curious expression crossing his face. "Let's stop there for today," he said when she finished the page. His voice was casual, but something in his eyes had changed. "You're doing very well, Lily. Your progress is interesting." On her way home, Lily's mind raced. Had he noticed that moment of musical truth? Did he suspect something? The thought made her pulse quicken with anxiety. She had chosen this community center specifically because no one here would know about Ming-Hui Chen, the former prodigy. She had been careful to use only her American name, to dress plainly, to give nothing away. But music had a way of revealing truth, despite all attempts at concealment. It was why she had abandoned it in the first place, after that terrible night at Carnegie Hall when everything had fallen apart. Lily paused outside her apartment building, looking up at the cloudy sky. She could stop the lessons now, make up an excuse and disappear. It would be easier than maintaining this charade. Easier than facing the questions that might come if Mr. Patterson began to suspect who she really was. But something held her back from running away again. These past weeks, despite the deception and the strain, had awakened something she thought was dead. Some small flame of love for music that 15 years of silence hadn't quite extinguished. She took a deep breath and went inside, knowing that next Tuesday she would return to that practice room. She would continue her performance as a beginner. And somehow, she would have to be more careful about hiding the musician she had once been, and perhaps secretly, still was, 3 months had passed since Lily first walked into the community center pretending to be a piano novice. Autumn had given way to winter, and frost patterns now decorated the windows of the practice room where she met with Mr. Patterson every Tuesday evening. "Your progress has been remarkable," Mr. Patterson said as he flipped through his teaching notes. His coffee mug sent wisps of steam into the air between them. "Most adult beginners take much longer to develop the skills you've shown." Lily adjusted her sweater, suddenly warm despite the chilly room. "I practice a lot," she said, the half-truth sticking in her throat. "It shows. But there's something else." He paused, studying her with a thoughtfulness that made her nervous. "Your intuition about the music is unusual. The way you naturally phrase even simple pieces." "Is that bad?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Not at all. It's just uncommon." He closed his notebook. "I'd like to try something different today if you're willing." Without waiting for her response, Mr. Patterson reached into his bag and pulled out a sheet of music that made Lily's heart skip. Chopin's Nocturne in E minor. Not a simplified version for beginners, but the original composition. A piece that required years of training to play properly. "This is way beyond what we've been working on," he said, placing it on the piano. "And I wouldn't normally give something this advanced to a student at your level. But I'm curious to see how you respond to it." Lily stared at the familiar notes, panic rising in her chest. This was a piece she had performed countless times, one that lived in her fingers and heart. Pretending to struggle with it would require acting skills she wasn't sure she possessed. "I don't think I can play this," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't expect you to play it well," Mr. Patterson said with a reassuring smile. "I just want you to explore it. See what happens when you push beyond your comfort zone." Trapped, Lily positioned her hands on the keys. She began haltingly, deliberately missing the first chord and then correcting herself with a nervous laugh. She played the opening bars with exaggerated caution, adding hesitations where none should be, flattening the emotional contours of the music into something mechanical. Mr. Patterson watched her hands intently. "Try to feel the music rather than just playing the notes," he suggested. "Chopin wrote this during a difficult period in his life. There's melancholy in every phrase." Something in his words broke through Lily's careful defenses. Melancholy. Yes, that had always been at the heart of this piece for her. Before she could stop herself, her fingers softened their attack on the keys. The next phrase emerged with a whisper of the expression it deserved. The subtle rubato coming naturally after years of living with this music. She caught herself quickly, returning to her deliberate awkwardness, adding a wrong note for good measure, but when she glanced up, she saw something in Mr. Patterson's eyes that terrified her. Not certainty, not yet, but definite suspicion. "That's enough for today," he said after she fumbled through another minute of the piece. His voice was carefully neutral. "It's advanced material, but I think exposing yourself to works like this can be inspiring, even for beginners." For the rest of the lesson, they returned to her regular exercises, but the atmosphere had shifted. Lily could feel Mr. Patterson watching her technique more closely, noting the way her wrists naturally maintained the proper position, how her fingers curved with the muscle memory of years of training. That night, Lily paced her small apartment, unable to settle. Her cover was beginning to crack, and she wasn't ready for the questions that would follow. How could she explain why Ming-Hui Chen, once celebrated as a rising star in classical music, was now pretending to be a novice in a community center piano class? The truth was too raw, too personal to share with a stranger. The following week, Lily arrived at her lesson to find Mr. Patterson talking with an older woman she didn't recognize. She had elegant silver hair and carried herself with the unmistakable posture of a longtime musician. "Lily, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Rivera," Mr. Patterson said. "She teaches our advanced students and happened to be free during our time slot today. I thought it might be interesting for her to sit in if you don't mind." The trap was so obvious that Lily almost laughed. They were testing her, but she had come too far to give up her charade now. "Of course not," she said with a forced smile, "though I warn you I'm not very good." "We all start somewhere," Mrs. Rivera said kindly, settling into a chair in the corner. "Please pretend I'm not even here." The lesson began normally enough with scales and simple exercises. Lily maintained her beginner's awkwardness, though the presence of a second teacher made it harder to concentrate on which mistakes to make and when. Halfway through the hour, Mr. Patterson pulled out a new piece, a Beethoven sonata movement. Simplified but still challenging for a true beginner. "I'd like you to sight read this," he said, placing it before her. "Just do your best." Sight reading, playing a piece for the first time without preparation, was difficult even for experienced musicians. For a beginner of 3 months, it would be nearly impossible to do well. It was the perfect test. Lily stared at the music, her mind racing. If she read it too easily, her secret would be obvious. If she struggled too much, it would seem unnatural given the progress she had shown so far. She began to play, deliberately counting under her breath, missing accidentals, and struggling with the rhythmic patterns. But maintaining this deliberate mediocrity required so much concentration that she occasionally slipped, her fingers automatically finding the correct notes and timing before she could stop them. From the corner of her eye, she saw Mrs. Rivera lean forward slightly, her expression changing from polite interest to focused attention. When Lily finished, the room was silent for a moment too long. "Very interesting approach," Mrs. Rivera finally said. "Your hand position is quite advanced for someone at your level. Who taught you to hold your wrists that way?" "No one," Lily said quickly. "Mr. Patterson showed me the basics, and this just feels comfortable." "Comfortable because it's correct," Mrs. Rivera observed. "Some students struggle for years to develop that natural position." The rest of the lesson continued with increasing tension, at least for Lily. The two teachers exchanged glances several times, and Mrs. Rivera took notes in a small book she kept on her lap. When the hour ended, Lily gathered her things quickly, eager to escape. "Before you go," Mr. Patterson said, "we're having a small student recital next month. Nothing formal, just a chance for everyone to share their progress. Would you consider performing?" The thought of playing publicly again, even in a small community setting, sent a wave of cold fear through Lily's body. Images from that night at Carnegie Hall flashed through her mind. The packed audience, the unforgiving lights, the moment when everything fell apart. "I don't think I'm ready for that," she said, her voice unsteady. "It's a very supportive environment," Mrs. Rivera assured her. "Everyone is a student here. No judgment, only encouragement." "I'll think about it," Lily said, knowing she would refuse later by email. Safer that way. But as she turned to leave, Mrs. Rivera asked one final question. "Have you ever played piano before these lessons, Lily? Perhaps as a child?" The direct question caught her off guard. "A little," she admitted, the small concession feeling like the only way to explain what they had obviously noticed. "I took a few lessons when I was young, but it was nothing serious. And it was so long ago that I've forgotten everything." Neither teacher looked entirely convinced, but they didn't press further. On her walk home, snow began to fall, soft flakes catching in Lily's hair and melting on her flushed cheeks. Her carefully constructed story was unraveling thread by thread. The more she played, even with deliberate imperfection, the more her true abilities revealed themselves in unconscious ways. The muscle memory in her hands, the instinctive understanding of musical phrasing, the natural technique that had been drilled into her since childhood. What would happen when they discovered the truth? Would they feel deceived? Would they ask the questions she had been avoiding for 15 years? As she reached her apartment building, Lily made a decision. She would continue the lessons, continue the pretense, but she would decline the recital invitation. She would be more careful, more consistent in her performance as a beginner. She could maintain the charade a while longer. What she didn't know was that Mrs. Rivera had already gone home and searched online for Ming Hui Chen pianist. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Mrs. Rivera was watching a YouTube video of a 14-year-old Chinese-American girl playing Rachmaninoff with astounding skill. Her face, a younger version of Lily's, intense with concentration and alive with the joy of music. The snow fell harder as night deepened. In her apartment, Lily sat at her keyboard in the dark, playing silently on the unpowered keys, her fingers tracing the ghostly shapes of music only she could hear. Despite her concerns, Lily found herself agreeing to participate in the community center's spring recital. Her refusal by email had been met with such genuine encouragement from Mr. Patterson that guilt had overcome her fear. He had written about how inspiring it would be for other adult beginners to see someone at her level performing. How could she explain that she was living a lie without revealing everything? So here she was on a bright April afternoon, sitting on a folding chair in the community center's main hall, waiting for her turn and to play. She had chosen the simplest piece possible, a basic arrangement of Moonlight Sonata that any 6-month student might attempt. She had practiced playing it imperfectly, adding hesitations and small mistakes that would seem natural for her supposed skill level. The room was filled with students of all ages and their supportive families. Children fidgeted in their Sunday best while teenagers checked their phones. Parents aimed cameras at the small stage where an upright piano waited under unflattering fluorescent lights. "Nervous?" asked a woman beside her, another adult student who had introduced herself as Tina. Lily nodded, though not for the reasons Tina might think. Her anxiety wasn't about making mistakes. It was about not making enough of them, about revealing too much of her true ability in an unguarded moment. "Me too," Tina confided. "I've been practicing for weeks, but I still mess up the middle section." "I'm sure you'll do great," Lily said automatically. Mr. Patterson approached them, program in hand. "Slight change of order," he said. "Lily, you'll be after Mei Lin now." Lily glanced at the program. Mei Lin was a 12-year-old student of Mrs. Rivera's who was playing. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw it. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. Not the entire concerto, presumably, but even a movement or section of that massive work was ambitious for a young student. "That's a very advanced piece," she said, before she could stop herself. Mr. Patterson nodded. "Mei Lin is quite talented. She's preparing for a youth competition next month." As if summoned by her name, a young girl in a blue dress appeared beside them, her face tight with anxiety. "Mr. Patterson," she said in a small voice, "I can't do it." "What's wrong, Mei Lin?" "The Rachmaninoff, I keep messing up the cadenza. I practiced all week, but it's still not right." Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't play it in front of everyone." Mr. Patterson knelt to the girl's level. "It's a very difficult piece even for professional pianists. You don't have to play it today if you're not comfortable." "But my parents." Mei Lin glanced across the room where an expectant couple sat. "Programs open on their laps, I'll explain to them," Mr. Patterson assured her. "We can find something else for you to play, or you can wait until the next recital when you're more prepared." Lily watched this exchange with a growing sense of déjà vu. How many times had she felt that same panic as a child? The weight of expectations, the fear of disappointment, the terror of public failure. Even now, 15 years later, she could feel her palms sweating at the memory. "I'll go talk to your parents," Mr. Patterson said, squeezing Mei Lin's shoulder gently. "Wait here." As he walked away, Mei Lin stood forlornly by the chairs, tears streaming silently down her face. Without thinking, Lily moved over to make space. "Do you want to sit?" she offered. The girl nodded and perched on the edge of the chair, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Rachmaninoff is really hard," Lily said softly. "You know it?" Mei Lin looked up, surprised. Lily hesitated. "I've heard it before. It's one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written." "The cadenza is impossible," Mei Lin whispered. "My fingers just can't move fast enough for those arpeggios." Before she could stop herself, Lily asked, "Which part specifically?" Mei Lin pulled crumpled sheet music from her folder and pointed to a dense passage of notes. "This whole section. And then when it goes into the big chords, I always miss some notes." Lily stared at the familiar notation, memories washing over her. This very piece had been her downfall 15 years ago. The same cadenza that troubled this young girl had been where everything had fallen apart for Ming-Hui Chen at Carnegie Hall. "Can I see?" Lily asked, taking the music. Her fingers itched to demonstrate, to show this child that the passage wasn't impossible, just challenging. That the fear was worse than the difficulty. "Do you play?" Mei Lin asked, confusion in her voice. "A little," Lily said, her standard answer. But something was shifting inside her. Seeing this girl's distress, so similar to what she had experienced, awakened an unexpected protective feeling. "There's a practice room in the back," Mei Lin said. "We could look at it there if you want." The sensible thing would be to decline, to maintain her cover, to avoid anything to do with Rachmaninoff. But the girl's eyes were hopeful now, and Lily found herself nodding. They slipped away from the main hall, down a corridor to a small room with a baby grand piano, better than the upright in the recital space. Mei Lin placed the music on the stand and sat on the bench, her shoulders tense. "Show me where you're having trouble," Lily said, standing beside her. Mei Lin positioned her hands and began to play, her small fingers stretching valiantly across the keys. She made it through the first few measures of the cadenza before stumbling, the complex runs falling apart under her hands. "See?" she said miserably. "It's too hard, may I?" Lily asked, gesturing to the bench. Mei Lin scooted over, making room. Lily sat, her heart pounding as her fingers hovered over the keys. She was about to cross a line she had drawn for herself 15 years ago. The trick with this passage, she heard herself saying, is to think of it as waves, not individual notes. Her hands descended onto the keys, and the opening of the cadenza flowed out. Her fingers finding the patterns they had never truly forgotten, she played slowly at first, demonstrating the groupings, the flow from one position to the next. See how it's all built on the same shape? Just moving up the keyboard, she explained, repeating a section. Your hand stays relaxed in the same position, just shifting. Maylin watched, wide-eyed. How do you know this piece? Instead of answering, Lily continued playing, her tempo gradually increasing as muscle memory took over. The music pulled her in, as it always had, and she forgot where she was, forgot her audience of one, forgot the years of silence. Her hands moved with increasing confidence through the intricate cadenza, the rolling arpeggios, the thundering chords. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the practice room door opening, didn't see Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Rivera standing in the doorway, their faces frozen in astonishment. She didn't notice other students and parents gathering in the hallway, drawn by the sound of virtuosic playing coming from the small room. It was only when she reached the final triumphant chords of the cadenza that reality crashed back in. The room was silent except for her ragged breathing. Maylin stared at her with something like awe. Then came the sound of applause from the doorway. Lily turned, her hands jerking away from the keys as if burned. Mr. Patterson stood there, his expression a mixture of shock and understanding. Beside him, Mrs. Rivera nodded slowly as if confirming a long-held suspicion. I knew it, Mrs. Rivera said quietly. When I saw your hands that first day, you're Minghui Chen, aren't you? The gathered crowd murmured in confusion. The name meant nothing to most of them, but a few of the older adults looked at Lily with dawning recognition. Who's Minghui Chen? Maylin whispered. Lily couldn't speak. Her secret was exposed. Her carefully constructed ordinary life shattered in a moment of weakness. She stood up shakily, looking for an escape route, but the doorway was blocked by curious onlookers. Minghui Chen was a brilliant young pianist, Mrs. Rivera explained, her voice carrying in the small room. She performed with major orchestras and was expected to become one of the great pianists of her generation. And then 15 years ago she disappeared from the music world entirely. All eyes turned to Lily, who felt her face burning with shame and fear. I don't understand, Maylin said, looking between Lily and the teachers. If you can play like that, why are you taking beginner lessons? It was the question Lily had been dreading for months, asked with the innocent directness only a child could manage. The answer was too complicated, too painful to explain to a room full of strangers. But Mr. Patterson stepped forward, his kind eyes meeting hers. I think that's a conversation for another time, he said gently. For now, we have a recital to finish. Maylin, would you still like to play your piece? The young girl looked up at Lily with newfound confidence. Yes, she said. I think I understand the cadenza better now. As the crowd dispersed, returning to the main hall, Mr. Patterson touched Lily's arm lightly. You don't have to explain anything today, he said. But when you're ready, I'd like to hear your story. Lily nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. 15 years of hiding, ended by a moment of compassion for a struggling young pianist. She didn't know whether to be terrified or relieved. As she followed the others back to the recital hall, Lily realized her hands were steady for the first time in years. Whatever came next, questions, explanations, judgments, at least the weight of deception had been lifted. The music she had tried to silence had found its voice again, whether she was ready or not. The week after the recital was the longest of Lily's life. She stayed home from work for 2 days, claiming illness, unable to face the outside world after her secret had been exposed. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Mr. Patterson and even Mrs. Rivera, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. What could she possibly say? On the third day, unable to bear the confines of her small apartment any longer, Lily bundled up against the spring chill and walked to a nearby park. The cherry trees were in full bloom, pink petals drifting like snow whenever the breeze stirred. She sat on a bench, watching a group of children chasing each other around the playground there, laughter carrying across the open space. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. This time she pulled it out. Lily, it's Tom Patterson. I understand if you're not ready to talk, but I want you to know that your Tuesday slot is still open if you want to come back. No pressure, no questions. Just music. She stared at the message for a long time. No questions? That seemed impossible. How could he not have questions about why a once-celebrated pianist was pretending to be a beginner? Why someone who had performed with the New York Philharmonic was now hiding in a community center piano class? Yet something in his message gave her pause. Just music, he had said, as if it could ever be that simple again. After another day of indecision, Lily found herself walking into the community center at her regular Tuesday evening time. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the door to the practice room. Mr. Patterson was there, arranging sheet music on the piano. He looked up when she entered, surprise and relief washing over his face. "You came," he said simply. Lily nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Would you like to sit?" He gestured to the piano bench. She moved mechanically to the familiar spot, her body remembering the routine of their lessons even as everything else had changed. Mr. Patterson took a seat in his usual chair but didn't open his teaching notebook. "I'm not gonna pretend I wasn't shocked," he said after a moment. "When I heard you play that Rachmaninoff, it was like watching someone transform into a different person right before my eyes." Lily stared at her hands in her lap. "I'm sorry for lying to you," she said quietly. "I'm more interested in why you felt you needed to," he replied. Ming-Hui Chen was on track to become one of the greatest pianists of her generation. Then suddenly nothing. No concerts, no recordings, no interviews. You disappeared completely. "You looked me up," Lily said. "It wasn't a question. Mrs. Rivera did initially, after your first meeting. She thought she recognized your technique." He paused. "The internet still has videos of your performances. Your Chopin was an extraordinary." Lily winced at the word, memories flooding back. "That was a lifetime ago." 15 years, he corrected gently. "That's not so long in the grand scheme of things." A heavy silence fell between them. Through the window, Lily could see the community center's garden, daffodils nodding in the breeze. How simple their existence seemed, to bloom when the time was right without fear or expectation. "What happened?" Mr. Patterson finally asked. "Why did you stop playing?" The question hung in the air, impossible to ignore any longer. Lily took a deep breath. "Carnegie Hall," she said, the words painful to speak aloud. "I was 17. It was supposed to be my big moment, a solo recital completely sold out. The critics were there, my family, my teachers, everyone who mattered in the classical music world." Mr. Patterson nodded, waiting for her to continue. "The program ended with Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto. I'd been playing it for months, had it memorized perfectly. But that night," her voice faltered, "I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was exhaustion. But halfway through the first movement, during the cadenza, the same part I showed Mei Lin, my mind just went blank." She could still feel the horror of that moment, the panic as her fingers froze on the keys, the terrible silence that fell over the packed hall. I tried to keep going, but nothing would come. It was like the music had been erased from my brain. I started making mistakes, horrible mistakes. I could hear people shifting in their seats, whispering. I kept playing somehow, but it was a disaster. "One bad performance doesn't end a career," Mr. Patterson said softly. Lily gave a bitter laugh. "It wasn't just the performance. It was what happened after. I couldn't touch a piano without having panic attacks. The thought of playing in public again made me physically ill. My parents had invested everything in my career, money, time, their whole lives. They couldn't understand what was happening. The pressure to get back on stage, to live up to everyone's expectations. It was crushing me." She looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. "So I left. I walked away from everything. The concerts, the recordings, my identity as Ming-Hui Chen. I legally changed my name to just Lily, moved across the country, took a normal job. I didn't touch a piano for 15 years. Until you came here," Mr. Patterson said. Lily nodded. "I missed it. The music. It was like missing a limb sometimes. But I was too afraid to just start playing again. I thought maybe if I pretended to be a beginner, if I could approach the piano without any expectations, you could find your way back, something like that." She looked down at her hands again, hands that had once been insured for $1 million. Now just ordinary hands with a small callus from her office pen. "It was stupid." "I don't think it was stupid at all," Mr. Patterson said. "I think it was brave." Lily looked up, startled. Do you know how many people give up their passions completely after failure or trauma? He continued. You found a way back to the piano on your own terms. That takes courage. His words were so unexpected, so different from the judgment she had feared, that Lily felt tears threatening. She blinked them back, unwilling to break down in front of him. What happens now? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Patterson leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. That depends on what you want. If you'd like to continue as my student, as yourself this time, I'd be honored. Though to be honest, your technique far surpasses mine. I don't want to perform again, Lily said quickly. I can't. No one's asking you to. But maybe there's a middle ground between concert pianist and complete withdrawal from music. What do you mean? He gestured toward the piano. Would you play something for me? Not as Ming-Hui Chen, the prodigy. Not as Lily, the pretend beginner. Just as yourself, whoever that is now. Lily hesitated, looking at the familiar keyboard. For months, she had forced herself to play badly, to suppress the technique and expression that had once been as natural as breathing. The thought of playing freely again, even for an audience of one, was both terrifying and tempting. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Just try, he encouraged. Something simple. Whatever comes to mind. Slowly, Lily turned to the piano. Her hands hovered over the keys for a long moment. Then, almost of their own accord, they began to play. Not Rachmaninoff or Chopin or any of the virtuosic pieces from her past, but a simple Bach prelude, one of the first pieces she had ever mastered as a child. The notes flowed clear and pure in the quiet room. She played without overthinking, without forcing expression or technical brilliance, just letting the music speak through her fingers as it had always wanted to do. When the final notes faded, Mr. Patterson remained silent, giving her space to process what had just happened. Playing openly, honestly, without pretense, it felt like taking a full breath after years of shallow breathing. That was beautiful, he said finally. Lily nodded, unable to speak. I have a proposal, Mr. Patterson said after a moment. Mrs. Rivera and I have been talking. We have several advanced students who could benefit from specialized coaching. Students like Maylene, who have talent, but need guidance from someone who understands the challenges they face. You want me to teach? Lily asked, surprised. Just a few students to start. No pressure, no expectations. Just sharing what you know. The idea had never occurred to her. She had been so focused on her own relationship with music that she hadn't considered helping others with theirs. I don't know if I'd be any good at teaching, she said, hesitantly. You were wonderful with Maylin at the recital. Natural, supportive, insightful, and you understand performance anxiety better than most. Think about it at least. As Lily left the community center that evening, cherry blossoms swirled around her in the spring twilight. For the first time in 15 years, she felt a glimmer of possibility. Not a return to her past life, but something new. A way to make peace with music on different terms. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Patterson. Same time next week? After a moment's hesitation, Lily typed back, yes. It wasn't a promise to teach or to perform or even to fully embrace her identity as Ming-Hui Chen again. But it was a step forward, a tiny rebellion against the fear that had controlled her life for so long. For now, that was enough. 1 year had passed since the day Lily's secret was revealed at the community center recital. The seasons had come full circle, and spring once again painted the city with fresh colors and possibilities. Much had changed in Lily's life during those 12 months, though the changes had come gradually, like a slow thaw after a long winter. She stood now in the hallway outside Studio 3, listening to the determined efforts of her youngest student, a 10-year-old boy named Danny, who was working through a challenging Mozart piece. His small fingers stumbled occasionally, but he persisted with a focus that made Lily smile. She remembered that feeling, the frustration and the triumph of mastering difficult passages note by note. That's enough for today, she heard Mrs. Rivera say as the lesson concluded. Remember what we talked about with the left-hand articulation. The door opened and Danny emerged, clutching his music folder. Hi, Miss Chen, he said brightly. Mrs. Rivera says I'm almost ready for the summer showcase. Lily still felt a small jolt whenever someone called her Chen instead of just Lily. After years of hiding her identity, hearing her family name spoken casually took some getting used to. That's W.E. Danny beamed and hurried off to where his mother waited at the end of the hall. Mrs. Rivera appeared in the doorway, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "He's making remarkable progress," she said. "Your technical suggestions for his hand position have made all the difference." Lily nodded, pleased. "For the past wonderful," she replied. "Your Mozart is sounding better every week." 8 months she had been working as a special coach at the community center, collaborating with Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Rivera to help their more advanced students. She didn't teach full lessons. She wasn't ready for that responsibility yet. But she offered specialized guidance on technique, interpretation, and most importantly, handling the psychological pressures of performance. "Ready for your session with Maylene?" Mrs. Rivera asked, gathering her things. "She's been practicing that Debussy piece all week." "I think so," Lily said, though a familiar flutter of anxiety stirred in her chest. Today's session with Maylene would be different from their usual coaching. After months of gentle encouragement from both Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Rivera, Lily had agreed to try something new, playing together with her student, a 4-hand duet they would perform at the upcoming spring recital. It would be Lily's first public performance, even in this limited, supportive context, since that fateful night at Carnegie Hall. As Mrs. Rivera left for her lunch break, Lily entered the studio and began arranging the music on the piano. The room looked different now than it had a year ago. Photographs of famous pianists lined the walls, including, at Mr. Patterson's insistence, a small picture of Ming-Hui Chen at age 15, playing with the Boston Symphony. Seeing her younger self there among recognized masters had been jarring at first, but over time Lily had come to accept it as part of her story, neither defining her present nor limiting her future. The door opened and Maylene bounced in, her energy filling the small room immediately. "I've been practicing our duet all week," she announced, dropping her backpack on a chair. The transition at measure 64 is finally smooth. Lily smiled at the girl's enthusiasm. In the year since they'd first connected over Rachmaninoff, Maylene had blossomed as a pianist. She had also become something unexpected in Lily's life, a mirror to her younger self, but one who was being guided to approach music with joy rather than crushing pressure. "Let's hear what you've been working on," Lily said, taking a seat beside the piano rather than at it. As Maylene played her solo pieces, Lily listened with a teacher's ear, noting areas for improvement while appreciating the musicality that came naturally to the young girl. This was the part of coaching she had grown comfortable with, observing, analyzing, suggesting. "Beautiful phrasing," she commented when Maylene finished a Chopin waltz. "Your rubato is more natural now, less exaggerated." Maylene nodded, absorbing the feedback. "Can we try our duet now? The recital's only 2 weeks away." Lily hesitated, then moved to the piano bench. Sitting beside her student, she positioned her hands over the keys, trying to ignore the slight tremor in her fingers. This 4-hand arrangement of Debussy's Petite Suite wasn't technically demanding for someone of Lily's abilities, but performing it publicly represented a huge psychological hurdle. "Ready?" Maylene asked, oblivious to her teacher's anxiety. Lily nodded and they began to play. The gentle opening flowed between them, Maylene handling the primo part while Lily provided the supportive secondo bass lines. As the music progressed, Lily felt the familiar sensation of being drawn into Debussy's world of color and light, her anxiety gradually receding as she focused on creating music with her student. When they finished, Maylene turned to her with bright eyes. "That was our best run-through yet. Do you think we're ready for the recital?" "Almost," Lily said, surprised to realize she meant it. "Let's work on the balance in the middle section. Your melody needs to come through more clearly there." They spent the next 40 minutes refining details, playing sections repeatedly until both were satisfied. Working this way, focused on the music itself rather than on her own fears, Lily found a calmness she hadn't experienced in years. As their session ended and Maylene packed up her music, the girl asked suddenly, "Ms. Chen, do you ever miss performing?" "The real kind, I mean, like you used to do." The question caught Lily off guard. "Sometimes," she admitted after a moment, "but it's complicated. Mrs. Rivera showed us videos of your old concerts." Maylene continued, "You were amazing, especially the Rachmaninoff." Lily felt a familiar tightness in her chest at the mention of that piece. Despite her progress over the past year, Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto remained a painful symbol of her greatest failure. "That was a long time ago," she said softly. Mei Lin seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. Mr. Patterson says there's going to be a special surprise at the end of the recital. Do you know what it is? Lily shook her head, genuinely unaware. He likes to plan these things on his own. After Mei Lin left, Lily remained in the studio, absently playing through parts of their duet as she thought about the girl's question. Did she miss performing? There had been magic in those moments on stage when everything aligned perfectly, when the music flowed through her without effort, when she could feel the audience breathing with each phrase. But the crushing pressure, the constant fear of failure, the impossible expectations, those she didn't miss at all. The studio door opened, interrupting her thoughts. Mr. Patterson entered, carrying a large envelope. "How was the session with Mei Lin?" he asked, setting his things down. "Good. We're almost ready for the recital." He nodded, watching her with that perceptive gaze that often made Lily feel he could see right through her carefully constructed walls. Over the past year, Tom Patterson had become more than just a colleague. He had become a friend. Perhaps her first real friend since she'd walked away from her former life. "I have something to show you," he said, opening the envelope and extracting a sheet of music. He placed it on the piano stand, and Lily's breath caught as she recognized it immediately. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, the full score. "What is this about?" she asked, her voice tight. Mr. Patterson sat beside her on the bench. "Hear me out before you say no." Lily waited, her heart racing. "For the past year, Mrs. Rivera and I have watched you rebuild your relationship with music," he said. "You've grown so much, not just as a teacher, but in your own playing when you think no one's listening." Lily blushed. She hadn't realized her private practice sessions had been overheard. "The spring recital is in 2 weeks," he continued. "We'd like you to close the program by playing the cadenza from the Rachmaninoff." "No." The refusal came automatically, instinctively. "I can't. You already did, remember? Last year with Mei Lin, you played it beautifully." "That was different," Lily protested. "I wasn't performing. I was just showing her—" "Exactly," Mr. Patterson said, his voice gentle but firm. "You were teaching, sharing, connecting through music rather than trying to prove something. That's what we're asking you to do again." Lily stared at the score, the familiar notes both tempting and terrifying. "I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish." Mr. Patterson sighed. "This piece has haunted you for 15 years. It's become a symbol of failure and fear in your mind. Maybe it's time to reclaim it. Not as Minghui Chen, the prodigy with everything to prove, but as Lily Chen, the teacher with nothing to prove." His words struck a chord somewhere deep inside her. The thought of facing this music again, of confronting the very passage that had unraveled her career, made her palms sweat. But there was something compelling in the idea of reclaiming the piece on her own terms. "Just think about it," Mr. Patterson said, standing to leave. No pressure. But as he reached the door, Lily called after him. "Who would I be playing for?" He turned, a small smile on his face. "For your students. For the community that's come to respect you, not for who you were, but for who you are now, and maybe most importantly for yourself." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Alongside coaching her students for the recital and rehearsing her duet with Mei Lin, Lily spent hours alone with the Rachmaninoff score, reacquainting herself with every nuance of the cadenza. Some days her confidence grew. Other days panic threatened to overwhelm her. But she persisted, driven by a determination she hadn't felt in years. The evening of the recital arrived with perfect spring weather, cherry blossoms scenting the air as families streamed into the community center. The main hall had been transformed with proper lighting, rows of chairs, and a newly tuned grand piano on the small stage, a rental for the special occasion. Backstage, Lily helped nervous students straighten bow ties and adjust hair ribbons. She checked sheet music and reminded forgetful teenagers about key signatures. Keeping busy with others' needs helped distract her from her own anxiety about what was to come. The program progressed smoothly through beginning students playing simple pieces to the more advanced performances. Lily's duet with Mei Lin received warm applause, the girl beaming with pride as they took their bow together. Finally, as the recital neared its end, Mr. Patterson stepped to the microphone. "Before we conclude tonight's program, we have a special performance," he announced. "Many of you know Ms. Lily Chen as a dedicated coach who has helped our students achieve new levels of musicianship this year. What some of you may not know is that Ms. Chen was once known as Minghui Chen, a concert pianist of extraordinary talent. A murmur ran through the audience. Mr. Patterson continued, "Tonight, she has graciously agreed to share her gift with our community by performing the cadenza from Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. As Lily walked to the piano on shaking legs, she caught sight of her students in the front row, their faces shining with excitement and curiosity. Milan gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up. These were not critics or competition judges. They were people who had accepted her as she was, who expected nothing more than the music itself. Sitting at the piano, Lily took a deep breath. The familiar panic rose in her chest, but alongside it was something new, a sense of purpose, of coming full circle. This wasn't Carnegie Hall. She wasn't 17 anymore. And most importantly, she wasn't alone. She began to play, her fingers finding the complex patterns with a surety that surprised her. The music that had once been her downfall now flowed through her without resistance. She played not with the technical perfection of her youth, but with the depth and understanding of someone who had lost and found herself through music. When the final notes of the cadenza rang out, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the audience erupted in applause, rising to their feet in spontaneous appreciation. Lily stood shakily, overwhelmed by the response and by the realization that she had finally confronted her greatest fear. As she took her bow, she saw Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Rivera at the side of the stage, both with tears in their eyes. They had known all along what she needed, not to reclaim her former glory, but to make peace with it and find a new path forward. Later that evening, as the community center emptied and the stage was being dismantled, Lily sat alone at the piano, gently touching the keys that had once been both her greatest joy and deepest sorrow. Mr. Patterson approached, carrying 2 cups of tea. "How do you feel?" he asked, handing her one. Lily considered the question. "Like I've been holding my breath for 15 years and finally exhaled," she said simply. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "What happens next is entirely up to you. No expectations, no pressure." Lily looked out at the now empty hall, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment, from child prodigy to frightened recluse to reluctant teacher to whatever she was becoming now. "I'd like to keep teaching," she said, "and maybe someday play again. Not concerts, not tours. Just music for people who want to hear it." Mr. Patterson smiled. One step at a time. Outside, the spring night was alive with possibility. Lily Chen, not Ming Hui the prodigy or Lily the imposter, but simply herself, stepped into it, ready at last to write the next movement of her life's composition.